Hello, Ninth. You're doing well. Welcome to Module 6. We're going to today go over the answers for the questions that were presented in Module 5 for the Odyssey. And I'm going to introduce you to the material for your second to last module, Module 6, which examines 2 books from the Odyssey. So on your screen right now and on my screen right now, we see the answer key for Module 5. Before we get into the answer key, I want to apologize for the error with the conjunctions video. Several of you reached out to me and said the video didn't work. That's my mistake. I subscribed to a service, and that subscription did not include student access, so I was able to see it. You weren't. Hopefully, and from what I saw looking over your answers, hopefully you were able to find a different resource. From what I saw, many of you did, and many of you did that correctly. So it was just a refresher for conjunctions. I don't think we'll have that issue this week. Again, if you encounter anything, feel free to reach out to me. Email is the best way to get a hold of me. Let's go over the answer key for module 5. Let's do green today. Okay, so module 5, number 1, who is the first to recognize Odysseus? So Odysseus returns to Ithaca after his journey, and he's almost reclaimed his world. He's almost gotten back and recaptured what is his, but he's been gone for about 20 years. And you can't just show up after 20 years of being the king and say, okay, I'm back and I'm ready to rule again, because he's outnumbered and people logically think he's dead. So who is the first to recognize him? He has to come up with a plan to be able to sort of navigate his way through Ithaca, because it's a different Ithaca. It's a 20-year gap in between the last time he's been there. So he's disguised as a beggar, thus the title of the book, The Beggar. And the faithful dog is sort of a hint to what you're going to see here. So, number 1, who's the first to recognize Odysseus? On page 928. But when he knew he heard Odysseus's voice nearby, he did his best to wag his tail, nose down, with flattened ears, having no strength to move nearer his master. Argos, his dog, is the first to recognize him. Argos. Argos, his dog. It's the last thing Argos does before Argos dies. Number 2, when Odysseus arrives home, he is disguised as what? He's disguised as a beggar on page 926. Because his home is full of enemies, she, Athena, advises him to proceed disguised as a beggar. So he sort of blends in to the lower class here, and that's what that's what his plan is, and his plan works out pretty well. If he were to show up and say, "Okay, I'm back, I'm the king," he'd be overrun by suitors, he'd be overrun by competition, and he'd be overrun by people who want to kill him to take what is his. So he has to act approach gently, I guess, is what he has to do, or with some tact and with some skill. Let's go here. 3. What strategy does Penelope use in order to prolong choosing a suitor to marry? Let me pause for a second. I wanted to mention something. If we look at this, number 1, some of you may have written Euryclea as well. Euryclea, or Euryclea, however you want to pronounce that, they're both acceptable here, is a maid. And she actually is washing the beggar's feet when she notices a scar on Odysseus's leg, and that's going to be the answer to number 5. But some of you may have put Euryclea or Euryclea for number 1. That's the first human to recognize him. The first thing, the dog, to recognize him is his own dog, and that's a signal that he's back. And you may have put Telemachus as well. Odysseus reveals to his son that he is Odysseus, but any of those 3 would work there. But if we're going to go by what is revealed in the text, Argos is the first to recognize him. But if you put Telemachus, that's acceptable. If you put Euryclea, I understand why you would put that as well. So those are humans that recognize him, not just dogs. So number 3, what strategy does Penelope use in order to prolong choosing a suitor to marry? So that word suitor, here. Not one who wears a suit, one who has a suit and has a case for marriage. What Penelope is facing is every single day, these muscle bound warriors are trying to get with her, and then they're trying to be king by being with her. She's the queen. So she has been putting this off for years, for years. They've been approaching her on a daily basis for years. So she sort of makes empty promises to them. She doesn't want to marry anybody. She holds out hope that her husband's still alive. And she remains faithful to Odysseus throughout all those years. On page 931, here's the strategy that she uses. Penelope, distressed by the demands of her suitors that she marry one of them, thinks of a way to trick them. She sets up her weaving in the hall, saying to the suitors that she is weaving a shroud for Odysseus and promising that she will choose a husband when she's completed the work. Well, that sounds fair enough. But her trick is, so every day I wove on the great loom, but every night by torchlight, oops, there's a mistake. Every night by torchlight, space, I unwove it. A simple trick. She is able to deceive her suitors for 3 years. It's pretty impressive. They didn't catch on. I don't know why they would, but they didn't catch on. So for 3 years, she's able to delay choosing one of them. And she never actually does choose one, which is, it shows that she has a little bit of, oh, how do you phrase this? She's strong in the face of adversity here. She's a very, very strong, and in this case, an independent woman, because she holds out hope that the one she loves will come back. Even though everybody else thinks he's dead, she still remains faithful and keeps that hope, which is what it takes. It takes hope to get through tough situations, as you guys are all sort of understanding and figuring out here. For how many years has Odysseus been gone? On page 928, he's been gone for 20 years. 10 years Trojan War, 10 years for him to get home. Excuse me. Number 5. What gives away the secret identity of the beggar when the maid, Euryclea, washes his feet? Page 930. As Euryclea does so, she recognizes Odysseus from a scar on his leg. Now, you might be thinking, oh, Mr. Good, that's disgusting. Why is maid washing some beggar's feet? The washing of the feet, if you look this up, it's of cultural significance in many cultures. To accept those who are new, that's a sign of acceptance, is washing of the feet. Um, Short story: when I was younger, I went to a different church as a visitor. And when I was there was a meal. And before the meal, and it's going to sound gross, but before the meal, there was a ceremonial washing of your neighbor's foot. And, part of it does sound gross, but it wasn't like, get out the soap and the sponge and scrub them down. It wasn't that. It was instead a simple pouring water onto the person next to you's foot. And there was no touching involved. But it's a sign of respect. It's a sign of uh, sort of like equality, and it's welcoming. So that is culturally significant, and that is something that is still done. So we're talking about a story that's thousands of years old, and some of the practices in the story are still components of our society today. So this is not just some weird, bizarre encounter that happens in a book from way back when. It still occurs. Number 6, what makes Penelope believe Odysseus is not dead? Well, there are several things. One is her hope that her husband has never been killed. And the second is on 928. A soothsayer has told his mother, Penelope, that Odysseus is alive and is already in Ithaca. So she gets these messages. She has these feelings that her husband is there. Maybe not looks. He maybe not. Maybe doesn't look like himself. Maybe he is not presenting uh, to be Odysseus, but he's there. And she gets word that, well, he's there, and hold out hope just a little bit longer. And she tries to do that, and I think she does that successfully. Okay, so those are the answers for the beggar and the faithful dog for Module 5. Looking at Module 6, which is what you see on your screen. I didn't assign it yet. I will this morning. Module 6, books 21 and 22. Each module section can be accessed below. You guys understand the grading, the quick write 1 point. Here's the quick write prompt. The writing focuses hyperbole right here. Okay. The role of hyperbole is to demonstrate an exaggeration to your writing. I know you guys don't like to exaggerate. I know you like to keep it to the facts and nothing more. But this is your chance to exaggerate a little bit. Using hyperbole means that you write in a way that gets attention by using comparisons that aren't quite literal, they're figurative, and they go above and beyond what is normally accepted. Learn more about hyperbole here. So this should be a link. Let's see if it is the correct one. I don't think it's okay. So I believe this uses the vocabulary video, but it's not through the vocabulary website. See, how about that? Her bag isn't literally a ton, but it is hyperbole. My bag weighs a ton. So this video is going to show you many examples of hyperbole. So you're going to want to check them out. Yeah, an eternity. 10 days is not literally an eternity. Okay, it's hyperbole. Speaking in hyperbole. So this is going to give you many examples of hyperbole. So it's an exaggeration. What I would like you to do for your response, 3 to 5 sentences. Use hyperbole in your writing. Write 3 different sentences that use hyperbole. If you want to use more, that's fine. Okay? So practice your use of hyperbole in your writing. 2, read. Here what we have, the test of the great bow, and that is a PDF version of the text. And here we have death at the palace. Okay, so this is 2, and they sort of flow right into each other. This is, I'm not going to say it's excessively long, but it's a little bit longer than you may have been getting used to here. So the test of the great bow. Um, the the content here is essentially Penelope coming up with a test of skill to choose someone who will marry her, who will be her. Okay, be with her rather, not be her. Who will be with her? So this test is going to include many of the suitors who've been trying to get with her for years, and it's going to include this guy who's dressed like a beggar, which, oh, by the way, is the epic hero Odysseus. And the thing about Odysseus and the thing about his skill is that he's the only one that can use his archery equipment because he is exhibiting the superhuman strength that he has. So when it comes to it, you have to think of the picture here. Okay, you have to think of the fact that Odysseus is dressed like a beggar. He looks weak. He looks frail. He looks old. He looks like he can't do anything. And what he's going to do is step up to the plate and accept this challenge, and he is going to wow the suitors and be revealed to everyone, and they're not going to believe what has happened. So this is where the test occurs, okay? And what we have here is an ancient gesture. Okay, so what we have here is the text where the test occurs. And after the test is over, Odysseus goes on to the next book. Homer actually tells us about Odysseus moving on to the next year, and it's called Death at the Palace. So once Odysseus reveals that, hey, I'm back. I mean, you can see the images. This would be Odysseus. I'd like to think that he's wearing more clothes than the textbook provides here, but this is Odysseus, and you can see that these would be the suitors, okay? And he rages on them, as he sort of should. They've been trying to take his wife, his land, his son, everything that was his. They've been trying to take it. And he's been alive, and he's not going to let it happen. So death at the palace, it's a slaughter. So you'll read that. This is the climax of the book, of the Odyssey. The watch section. This is a teacher reading and explaining the test of the great bow, and this is a teacher reading and explaining death at the palace. This right here is a YouTube link. I strongly recommend you check this out. I would say it's pretty entertaining. I hope it pops up here. It's a YouTube link to the film version of those two sections. I believe it starts with Athena, but we'll see. No, it's going to be an ad, but it's going to be from a film version of the Odyssey. So I would strongly recommend you check that out. Okay. Your study guide questions are 2 sections. Okay. There's 3 for Test of the Great Bow, 3 for Death of the Palace. All right. The resources are down here. Strongly recommend checking out the summaries. If you've been using these, they may have been helpful for you. As I said before, this is the second to last module. So those of you who have been clearly struggling, uh, the end is near. Okay, the, the light at the end of the tunnel is shining right now. Next week there are going to be two assignments. One's going to be the last module, and the second is going to be a critique of me. Okay, as a teacher, I think feedback from students is incredibly helpful. So I'm going to provide that critique next week. So I'm just giving you a heads up that it's going to be there, and I would like you to complete it. It's going to be anonymous. I've been grading you all year long. I think it's fair for you to grade me as well. Okay, so we're going to approach that next week when we get there, but we only have two modules left, and this is the 6th. The next will be the 7th, and that'll be it for the course. Okay, so if you have questions, please reach out to me. You'll be able to find the the content for Module 6 on your Google Classroom page. You have the capability for office hours, 8:30 to 10:30 every weekday. Email is the best way to get a hold of me. If you feel a need to reach out and let me know about something, please do. For those of you who have been spotty in your submissions, you have 2 weeks left to get that late work in and figure it out. Okay. I've been putting grades in usually during the week that they've been due. You should check your grades and see where you stand. If you have any questions about grades, please let me know. But there's not going to be a final exam this year. We're just using this information from the distance learning component and averaging it in with the rest of the year. Okay? So if you have questions, you know where to find me. Email is the best way to get a hold of me. I wish you luck, and if you need anything, you know where to get a hold of me. I will see you next week. Have a lovely week.